So I've decided to do something a little different. I thought it would be nice to have a bit of a bedtime story. A scary bedtime story. A lot of people read scary stories, however this story is my own and something me and my family experienced firsthand. To set the scene, I live in an old Victorian English home, with the foundations dating back to the 18th century. One can only imagine the history within the plaster of these walls, the wood of the staircase, and the stone of the basement. Aged like a fine wine with both sweet and bitter tones, layer after layer giving birth to something rather extraordinary. During my time living here, there have been numerous antiques come in and out of these doors, buying and selling a variety of items, some, however, coming with extra unwanted attachments. It was after a collection of one of these said items when things started to get a little strange. At first small unnoticeable things, seeing something in the corner of your eye, hearing knocks and sounds that you will happily dismiss as being the cats. All things you can prove to have rational reasons behind them. As I said, at first. After pulling up in the car, me and my mum were returning from a trip to the shop. We were tired and lugged all the shopping to the front door. I was first to the door waiting as my mum walked up the drive with keys in hand. Like a child, I swung off the door and jiggled the handle to show my anticipation to get in. The tension from my hand to the door disappeared as the locked door suddenly opened. Confusion rose in me as I looked back to the door that was once again closed and locked. Had I hallucinated? I felt the door give way. I saw it open, but the door was how it should be, locked and closed, and felt like it had never happened. Although shaken, I assumed that I had hallucinated. That was until I turned to see my mum wide-eyed and speechless. She had also witnessed what had just occurred. I realised at this point whatever had happened was indeed very real and very unexplainable. This realisation sent a shiver down my spine as the rational side of my brain couldn't comprehend what had happened. Both disturbed by the event, we entered the house in the hopes that it was a one-time phenomena. We both are no stranger to weird happenings and events, however, as we later realised, it would not be a one-time phenomena. A day or two had passed since the event and the house was quiet. I was getting on with my day-to-day activities. I knew my mum and my aunt were sharing a conversation in the porch while enjoying a smoke. In the meantime, my hands were busy washing pots. The piece was cut short, however, as I heard a commotion from the porch, shortly followed by my mum and my aunt coming through the door rather hastily. They both seemed rather startled. After catching their breath, they explained what happened. During their conversation, while not concentrating, my aunt felt a tug on her sleeve. Assuming it was my mum, she turned to her and asked her what was up. My mum wondered what she meant, as she hadn't said anything, with which my aunt asked about her tugging her sleeve. My mum explained that she hadn't, and the situation became more confusing. Before the two of them could speculate who or what had tucked my aunt's sleeve, their attention was swiftly attracted to something more sinister. The room grew heavy, and with it carried the echo of a child's laugh, the origin of which came directly from the empty space between the pair. The sound travelled up their spines like a creeping ice, shaking them to the core. They both shared a look of terror. No time was wasted as they shot for the front door and the safety of the house. making their way to the kitchen to find me and in need of a strong brew. Again, I'd like to say this was a single event and that we could forget and move on, but unfortunately, this was only building to quite the climax that we would have never expected. At this point, with the strange occurrences, the atmosphere of the house had become unsettled, similar to the hum you'd feel in the air before a large storm, building like a pressure in your head. While relaxing in the living room, me and my mum watched TV while simply chatting about the latest gossip. Our conversation, however, was cut short with the rumble of a large crash that came from the middle room. Our first instinct is one of the cats had knocked something large over, so we moved quickly to make sure they were okay, and that whatever it was wasn't broken. We arrive in the middle room, however, to find nothing had been moved and nothing knocked over. It was then my mum realised the origin wasn't in the middle room. In fact, it was outside in the porch, where we would store furniture not in use like dining room chairs. I hear her exclaim, to which I approach to find a scene of furniture thrown against the walls of the room. The room was a mess. The chairs and tables that had been neatly placed in the middle of the room had been upturned and found at the skirting of the room. It was as though there had been an explosion that had pushed it all outwards from the centre of the room. Furniture that wasn't stacked and simply in the room had also been shifted, that were no way near the fallen furniture. So how did they get moved too, if it was the furniture simply unstable and falling? The hum in the air just as prominent, if not heavier, the further in the room you got. The pressure like a tingling on the outside of your skull. The cats had no access to this room, and we were sure the furniture had no way to fall. There was no explanation for the kind of violent nature the evidence was showing. The more we analysed, the more the fear clutched the back of my throat. At this point, we realised we were dealing with something far more dangerous than a mere sprite causing mischief. This was something that could indeed cause us harm, and so we had to act quickly before the situation could get any worse. It didn't take us long to realise the strange events began after taking in an antique cuckoo clock. We speculated that whatever this was had something to do with the clock. With that, we simply sold the clock as quickly as possible, in the hopes that whatever it was would go with it. And you know what? After we got rid of the clock, there were no events of the like again. Silence. Maybe it's coincidence. There's always a way to explain mysterious events. Maybe it was an hallucination. When the door opened, and auto-suggestion made my mum think she saw the same thing. Maybe my aunt's clothes shifted at the same time as the neighbour's kid laughed, and the sound got distorted in the porch to sound closer than it was. Maybe the furniture wasn't organised or as stable as we thought and did simply fall. Or maybe it was something else. Well, my sweet listeners, I will leave you to speculate on what is the truth. But, in truth, we will never know. And with that, I close the book on this story and wish you the sweetest of dreams. So until next time, find solace in these words, and I bid you farewell.